This fly is one by Drew Chicone originally. So it's a shrimp gurgler pattern. All I'm going to do is change it up a little bit. I'm going to put a couple of stinger hooks on the front. So first things first, this is a Sakuma long shank hook. This is a 3/0 hook, so fairly big. The one I'm going to tie, I'm actually going to be using for barramundi and fish up in the tropics. You'll see here up at the eye, I've pushed on 2 sequins, fairly reasonably sized sequins. In this case, they're just pearl, so they'll go relatively see-through. But what that'll do is give it a sort of a popper effect in the water, and it holds the tail up. Okay, so what I am going to do is dub the body the same as I would any normal shrimp, and for that I'm going to use Senyo's laser dub, a little bit of fuzzle dub, and a little bit of ice dub UV tan. For the antennae, that's tan UV Krystal Flash. The stinger hooks, okay, so what I've got here are the stinger hooks that I've already made up. So what we have is 70-pound braid, and you'll see I've coloured it orange and black. All right, and then the hook itself is actually a Daichi Tube Fly hook. So you'll see it's a fairly strong hook. Other good hooks to use for the stinger hooks are the Gamakatsu SL45s. They're very strong for their size. So that's these guys, and whatever size. So these are size 10s, so you probably use them on slightly smaller, but 10s and 8s for stingers. I'll let you in on a little trick when we get to it. The other thing I'm going to use for the mouth parts for the shrimp is tan Marabou. All right, I think that's about it. The thread I'm going to use, I'm actually going to use mono thread. It's a little bit harder wearing, but it also does a really good job of holding down the foam. So this is just ordinary 2mm foam closed cell that we're going to use for the carapace for the shrimp, and obviously that's what's going to form the gurgler at the end. All I've done is cut it to size and created the tip, which is going to be the bit that sticks out over the front for the shrimp. I think that's about it in terms of materials. You can add rubber legs obviously as well, which I will do. I'm just going to put some orange barred rubber legs to go along with the 2 stinger hooks. The only other thing, of course, you will need is good old epoxy shrimp eyes, or easy shrimp eyes if you want to get the easy shrimp eyes, whatever you find the best. But I make my own shrimp eyes, as you can see there. So they're just epoxied, and then I just whack them on a bit of tape in pairs, so I size them up. Just makes it a lot easier and a lot quicker. All right, let's get started. All right, so the thread's on. That's just, as I said, mono thread. I'm just going to lay a quick base down on the body, and then go right up against the sequin and put a bit of thread behind it just to hold that hard against the eye of the hook. All right, so this is, to tie this is no different to the way you would tie any of the shrimps. Quite often if you're doing a shrimp that's going to sink, you'll tie it that way with the dumbbell eyes on the bottom. We're obviously tying it differently because we're doing the eyes up on the top, and we want the hook bend and pointing towards the bottom. Alright, so first thing I'm going to do is just tie in a bit of Marabou for the mouthpiece. Now, you could use other materials. I choose to use either Marabou or rabbit, basically because you get that movement in the water. So you think about what you're trying to do. You're trying to entice a fish to come up and take this off the surface. And once you've stopped the strip and the fly sitting still, the Marabou is still going to move. It is a really, really good material, especially for things like barramundi, who will wait for the movement and then come and hit the fly. So that's the that piece done, and then I'm just going to put in some feelers using some Krystal Flash over the top of that. All right, and again, I'm going to keep these longer than I probably normally would, more again for the movement factor. You know, I want that little bit of extra movement as we go. Alright, so there's those in. And then I'm just going to turn it over. Alright, I'm going to get some rubber legs. And all I'm going to do is just take one and then cut it in half. So I don't want the rubber legs to be really long. And the reason for that is I don't want it to interfere with the two stinger hooks that I'm going to be tying in. Alright, so all I'm going to do with the rubber legs is in half. Alright. Loose wraps to hold them in place. And then bring it around the other side. Hold that down. Some loose wraps hold it in place. Stops them springing out so you can see the rubber legs in. Alright, that's that bit done. So they're pointing downwards. Then the stinger hooks. Now, if you're fishing into the snags, it's probably worth having your stinger hooks pointing that way. Alright, so point up. It just gives you a little bit more snag resistance. So we want them about there. The idea of the stinger hooks, by the way, is for fish that short strike, or quite often, and this is especially the case for things like bass and probably barramundi and some of those ones that sort of boof. You will want something that's going to hook up when the fly gets pushed forward by the fish. And by that I mean the fish come up and they create such a bow wave with their mouths open that quite often poppers and gurglers will move away from the fish, and that's not what you want, obviously. So that's why I tie in the stinger hooks. There's still a reasonable chance of hooking up because it extends a little bit further back from the fly. Alright, now another little trick, and this is something I know a few people that have tied flies with stinger hooks have found. They sometimes wrap, alright, so they, you know, as you're casting they end up back under here. The trick there is put a little bit of epoxy, alright, on the first centimetre or so. So all I'm going to do is put a little bit of this hydro and let that soak in. And what that does is it'll hold the braid away from the hook a little bit. Just gives it a little bit, you'll see how that's sitting up now. So it gives it a little bit of tension and stops it coming back around on itself. Alright, so that's that. So that's the legs and the stingers in place. Now what I'm just going to do, just to neaten that up a little bit, is put another piece of Marabou across the top. Alright, and this one just a slightly bit longer than the previous piece. And that just tidies up that front end a little bit. Alright, right to the bend of the hook. Okay, there it is. So that's it. So that's the front of the hook with the stingers attached, ready to go. Alright, so next is eyes. Alright, so like I said, I just create my own. These ones are transparent with black pupils. So all we do is we tie those in either side. So I'll turn that around so you can see it, and just past the bend of the hook a bit, keeping it to the side. Now I bend them out so that they stick out a little bit, proud of the other materials, because the Marabou will tend to crowd it a little bit. So cut that off. Don't use your good scissors to cut the mono. I keep a pair of old surgical scissors for that job, and it makes your other scissors last a lot longer. So you don't want your eyes sticking up. Alright, so I'm trying to keep them relatively flat to the hook. So the shank of the hook, I'm keeping the eyes either flat or slightly turned down, because you remember the fish are going to see this from the bottom, so you don't need to have them sitting up like you would on a normal fly. Alright, so that's the body done, eyes in. And what I then do again is with the hydro clear goo, give it another squirt and let that soak in for a sec. You'll see that soaking in. The reason I do that is it holds the eyes in place, stops them getting ripped out, stops all the materials coming loose. Your fly's going to last a hell of a lot longer and catch you more fish. Alright, so we're ready to dub the body. Alright, okay, so a little tip, when you're tying with Marabou, just moisten your fingers and run it across the Marabou a little bit. It really helps to control the Marabou and you don't end up with it coming back into your fly all the time. Like, alright, so that's the eyes done. Make sure they're pointing down a little bit like so. Pretty good. Okay. Okay, some UV tan eye stub is the next bit. So we'll get the thread back up towards the eyes. Just be careful that you don't crowd the eye with this and push the eyes in too far. Remember, you want the eyes to be fairly prominent. You know, I've said it on a couple of occasions that I you know, quite often believe that the eyes of it, whether it be a baitfish pattern or a shrimp pattern, are what actually draws the strike. You know, it's something that the fish look at and react to. You think about things like when you're fishing for Australian salmon and they're fixated on those little tiny baitfish. All they really see is the eye, because the eye is the only thing that's prominent. The rest of the baitfish is fairly well transparent. So anyway, that's my theory. I quite often over-exaggerate the eyes on flies. So for shrimp flies, I'll use probably a bigger eye than most people would think necessary, but that's just the way I prefer to tie my flies. I mean, I've had a fair bit of success with fish eating them, so it can't be all bad. Right, so the next bit, I'm just going to do the Senyo's laser dub for the rest of the body and taper it. So, you know, you want to taper it the same as a shrimp, thick up at the front, coming to a narrower body at the back. Don't, again, be relatively sparse with the dubbing. Don't create this humongously thick body. You want to tease this out and not have too much left on the hook. You want to create like a halo effect with the dubbing, but you don't. Given that this fly's got a float, you don't want too much material, or it's going to sink. You know, once the material starts getting wet, it's going to start weighing the fly down. You know, when you're fishing these things, most people, when they fish with gurglers and you know, floating flies, tend to go for a floating fly line. You know, the actual best thing to do, especially for things like barramundi and bass, is have an intermediate with a reasonable length leader. Let the line sink and the fly will stay on the surface, but when you strip it, it'll bloop and go under, and that basically is what entices the strike, and then it'll slowly float back to the surface. So you've got that movement, especially with that Marabou up the front, you've got that movement all the time. You know, so bloop, everything's moving. It's gets pulled under towards where the fish is actually feeding, and then comes back up. All right, so I've just taken the thread back to the front. Now I'm going to tie in the foam. All right, so this, I want the point just past the eyes a little bit. All right, so we get that just past the eyes like that. So from underneath, if I turn that over, that's what you see. All right, so shaped a bit like a prawn, and then thread. All right, like that. Now don't tighten the thread up too much, or that ends up sticking up like that, and that's not what you want. You want it sitting down flat like that. Okay. Then lift your foam, bring your thread back, tie in the next bit. straighten it up if you need to straighten it up. Same thing again, pull your thread forward under the foam, tie in the next bit. All right, and you can see that's starting to get the shrimp shape to the body. All right, this will probably be the last one. So shrimp that there, like so. And then you've got that bit sticking up at the back becomes the tail for the fly. All right, so that's it. I'm just going to tie that off. Whip finish. Trim it. Alright, then under here I'm going to use the Velcro and pull the dubbing through to create the legs. And again, what this will do is give the fly a whole lot more movement. Again, once you stop stripping or you are moving the fly, the legs are going to move a bit. So don't tease a hell of a lot out, but you want to tease it so that you've got some legs and they're going forward. All right, that's it. Done. You can see that sequin pushes the foam up, creates that curve in the tail, and that's what's going to give that a real bloop when it goes. You can see the stinger hooks there at the front, going to catch anything that short strikes the fly. If I turn it over, you can see the eyes prominent out either side of the foam at the front. That's really important, and you can see that real shrimp sort of shape through the body. It actually thicker at the front, thinner at the back, tail sticking up. That's it. Simple as that. Enjoy.